And, Jerry, so at the end of my mind, I did like the Judy, the gimmick. And I wasn't a huge fan of the whole wheelchair doll thing, but I get it as well for marketing. And, Mark, on whatever level, was a part of it, was cool with it. And, that's one of the things about Mark, which, people don't get. He will roll with almost anything, and when people are bringing ideas, he's like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go with it, and sometimes you don't always think, how is this going to look in a year or two? But you know what? He was a team player. Like, that's one of the things that WWF officials didn't know. If they had brought over the WCW people, could have explained, hey, by the way, this guy is like the biggest team player in our organization. He did pretty much anything he was asked of, was always stellar. He was always enhancing others as far as, when he was with Scotty. Scotty's the man, and he was doing his thing, until they broke up. But, Mark was really much a team player, and it saddens me at the end of the day from wrestling fans that don't get it. But for the career of what he put together, from the time he was a handsome stranger and fabulous Fabian to Marcus Alexander Bagwell to Buff Bagwell, this guy is a wrestling Hall of Famer, period. It shouldn't be a WWE Hall of Fame. It should be a wrestling Hall of Fame. This dude did it. He put in his stripes. I was driving in Pittsburgh with the cab driver. We're going to the Yankees game. I'm telling him
last
week. I'm in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago, whatever it was now. And I'm telling the guy, by the way, are you a wrestling fan? He goes, I know Hulk Hogan, whatever. He goes, okay. So we're doing this series, do you know Marcus Bagwell? He goes, Buff Bagwell? Of course I know Buff Bagwell. Like, the guy's not even a wrestling fan, and he knows Buff. This is the level of star the man was going to be. And, the sport of wrestling, entertainment, whatever you want to call it, should give the man his due. He put in his time, did everything, great gimmicks, great storylines, produced, was a high flyer, was a heavyweight, and this man's a Hall of Famer in my book.
And not just for him, for the whole industry. And just, and you said something about people coming with ideas or team player. He always was good at, or great at, adding to that idea, or knowing when to extract something and say, no, let's take that out. Let's take that out. Let's do this. Why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? Even in our first match, that one that, with the deal we're going to get into.
We'll get into that.
Stay tuned, folks. Hey, he knew. And if you said, well, no, let's do, okay, but if we do that, then he was phenomenal at it. And it's just, part of it.
Listen, we know Mark's strengths as far as his wrestling ability, his time on the mic. If somebody came to me and said, what is Marc Bagwell's greatest weakness? I will say this: he doesn't know how to say no. He's a people pleaser. Takes on more than he needs to, really wants to make the people happy around him. Sometimes bites off more than he can chew because he wants to please everybody around him. He's that giving of a person. Even someone he just met, if he can make them happy that day, like, they ran out of 8x10s. He gets down the person's information. He goes and gets his own 8x10, mails it to the guy on his own dime. That's the kind of guy Marc Bagwell is. Growing up, same way?
Absolutely, no doubt. And I guess touching back on that was the autographs. Back when we started, traveling, the gymnasiums, the skating rinks, and he would say, it's over. It's over, bro. Let's go. Let's go eat somewhere. I'd be, all right, let's go. We'd walk outside, and here's another 50, 60 people waiting by the back door or coming out somewhere. And he stayed, if it was an hour or an hour and a half, signed every autograph, was real big with the special needs kids, getting them back, maybe backstage, signing all their stuff. He made sure it didn't matter from A to Z. Babies, the women, they came from, they always managed to pop out. Somebody you knew or you didn't know, and they want the autographs. And then I'm thinking, man, we're gonna be out of here in about 10 minutes. Let's 9 o'clock, midnight. We're finally leaving, finding whatever we can find. I'm begging him to go to Crystal. He won't. And he got to go somewhere. Back then, it was big on the Wendy's, as we talked about the Wendy's. Had to get the grill.
They make a great burger. Absolutely.
he wanted 6 grilled chicken sandwiches and 2 baked potatoes.
Yes.
And that was his big deal. But,
you've gone from 12 to 4 to 6. I'm keeping count now, by the way. So the numbers change, but I guess depends on the day.
Depending on what he had that, if he had a Quest bar that day or not, it was wow.
But I gotta tell you why part of the reason why I bring it up, Jerry, is people just so they understand. Jerry and I talk pretty much on a daily basis. Like we text each other all the time. One of us is driving somewhere. If I'm driving up north, I call him. He calls me after work. Like we've talked about a lot of stuff before this series came to be. You know, it's like we really bonded just from the messaging, the way I saw Marc reacted, the way you reacted. And, you know, you're a fun, lovely guy. You and I are like big kids. We're never going to grow up. We get excited.
I'm not.
I refuse to grow up. It's fine.
I'm
a grown man in a macho man shirt. Come on.
I've had a bunch of women say, well, not really women. I've had a bunch of people say, grow up, man. You know, and I can't. I have to hunt all the time, hunt. Like going to the baseball games, every game we can go to, we go to the games. Like I guess you and I were texting that night. You were at the Pittsburgh Yankees game. I was at the Los Angeles Angels game.
Marlins.
With Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. That was a big deal. Wow, what a long night.
Who pitched for you? Was it Syndergaard or was it Ohtani that night? The Angels.
Scheduled was Sandy Alcantara. Was it Alcantara, I guess?
Yeah.
Against Shohei Ohtani, and at the last minute they backed Shohei up a day, and ended up being Noah Syndergaard, and he started off really
nice consolation prize.
Really well, started off really well, and then somebody, I think Garrett Cooper, you can't get him out. I think he's batting probably 870 batting average, not slugging. Not really. That's being a little facetious, but I think he had a 2-run homer, and the Angels never recovered. They were tired. They had been traveling as well. And, but it was great. You know, you and I were texting that game, and I had no idea. I'm watching the scoreboard, and you got a 1-0, 0-0 score, 0-0, 1-0 Pirates over the Yankees, the best team in baseball thus far in. And then I was joking with you that next day we were flying back, and I said 1-0 Cincinnati. What's up with that? And you were like, you were lost.
I was
lost.
I
kept saying 1-0 Cincinnati.
I'm like, Cincinnati, I was like, talking about?
And then I told you 1-0. Then we said Pirates, and I said, uh-oh, I should have never said anything. The Braves are going to lose tonight, and they did. The karma got me.
Well,
we got back, and it was a great time. But yeah, it was, you know, Marc, anybody, it started. He never was a selfish person, ever. Anything, money. I've told you before, if I had a good enough reason, and he knew he wouldn't get attacked at the mall, that was the big thing. If we went to the mall shopping for Christmas, it's you know, we called it Buff Bagwell at the mall. And I sort of dug it a little bit. You know, I was like, you know, and he was like, we've been to one store, we've been here 3 hours. But it didn't matter. From the time he would, if I said, let's go to the mall and buy something, he'd buy something, whatever he bought. He goes, he's Jimmy, you got to get you something too, man. I said, yeah, I'm good. I want to go to the electronics store. I don't want clothes. I want electronics. But he didn't matter. I told you, if it was a good enough reason, I said, we're going to buy matching Mustangs or Corvettes, he was in. Very, very generous.
I got to tell folks here, by the way, just so you all understand, getting to know Jerry, getting to know Marc, you could tell the parallels family-wise, by the way they talk, their infectious grin. If you're going to ask someone in this Bagwell Hood family for a story, it's very easy to write the scripts for these series, because all I got to do is ask Jerry or Marc one question. They're going to answer you with 5 different stories on totally unrelated items, but eventually they'll find their way back to that question. But in answer to that one question, you have to say 5 other stories to get there, which is unbelievable.
And we always have to say, and back to the original, but yeah, and then sometimes after the story gets so long, I'm like, I'm looking for the script. And I'm saying, uh-oh, I've lost.
Where are
the
we going with
script.
this again?
Rewind this, rewind. I'm trying to read it. I can't. What'd you say? And so it,
So Mark, we love you, buddy, but I don't know who's the better storyteller. Jerry, you give him a run for his money, man. You got some good tales. And it's because you guys have such a good memory, number one. The way you present the story also, and your energy with it. You get so excited as if it just happened yesterday,
yeah, I mean, and the stories, I mean, that we've been through, we could write a book about it, but nobody would buy it because we're the only ones that know it,
Well, we're writing. Well, that's why we're doing the Marc Bagwell series, because now we're going to tell it.
Yes. And so therefore, yeah, I mean, it's the stories are, you can't make this up. And they're, I know most of them. I've been involved in most of them. And then there's a lot that, he's either kept from me or kept from his mother that we didn't know about, or the brothers, or the tapping the brake lights and playing brake lights. And I've been in a lot of, a lot of good stories with that,
We're not going to talk about brake lights right now. We're not going to talk about the time you guys went to the convenience store together. We're going to save that one. But part of the thing that people don't understand, with wrestlers today, you hear about them going to the performance center, they're training for 6 months, a year. All of a sudden they're right up to the WWE and they're superstars, back in Mark's days, and Jerry having right along shotgun with him, and you're traveling to all these cities. Like Jerry, you talked about in the previous chapter, you're traveling, but for the money you're making, by the time you're paying for gas and food, you're actually broke, or you're out money, and you're doing this for the love and learning the craft of wrestling. Like Mark paid his dues, correct?
Oh, absolutely, no doubt about it. We'd leave with about $50, headed out in a 1989 Daihatsu. You've heard the story. And we'd fill it with gas. Gas was 80, 90 cents a gallon back then. So 10-gallon tank, man, $9, you'd go 400 miles, And
do you recall the first time though that you guys going to these cities, traveling around in little small arenas or convention centers, wherever you were, but the first time you guys stepped out in public as Mark became a wrestler, and the first time you guys got identified by a fan, do you recall that offhand?
South Carolina, and I believe the town was Bluffton. It took us like 6 years to get there. I remember that. It was like incredible, lengthy.
Carolina's huge. It's huge.
It goes way across. It starts over either an 885, straight up 85, or you can go straight out I-20 and hit the top part. It's a pretty big state. It's not as big as Georgia, but it's still getting over there, because Georgia dips down and it gets bigger, and you just keep going and going and going. But like I said, the stories, imagine us two on the way over there telling stories. And then that's, but we get there, and at that time, early 90s, you didn't have a lot of internet. None. You didn't have TV for wrestling at that level.
You had your 9 channels.
2, 5, 11, 17, 30, and 36 for us. Maybe 46.
Maybe you're going to pick up something like reruns on Saturday at noon. They'll put on some kind of wrestling. That's about it.
But he traveled. The big thing that I think is, no matter where it was, and the promoters, Steve Lawler or Buddy Lee Parker, Taskmaster, I believe, Kevin Sullivan, is that correct?
Yeah, very good.
And I think those guys had a big hand in of where everything was, where this, that, the promoters. And he always went. If it was Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, he went. And he built that name. And they were like, so people started using it on the card, Marcus Alexander Bagwell. And he built that name. And it didn't matter. Like I said, if we had $50 at that time, and we were traveling, we spent 10 on gas, we're like, we got 40 left. And I'm thinking, golly, I can get on $40 for a week. But then we stop, get something to eat. There's 25 or 30. And then he gives me $10. Here's $10, whatever. I'll give him 10, whatever it was. And then he'd get paid $100 or $150. And then by the time we get more gas, stopping it, he was, by the time we reached Marietta or Kennesaw, wherever we were living at that time, your money was gone. And then, of course, we went back to work the Monday. If we were late, Big Jude was, there. We went back to the lumber yard, the hardware.
Bagwell lumber yard.
Wherever we were then, and that timeline may be a little bit off, but whatever we were doing at that point, we went back and did it again for 4 days. And then that Friday, hey, we're going here. We're going to Mississippi. We're going to South Georgia. We're going back to that little town in South Carolina. It didn't matter. We were ready. We went. It was fun. And that's where it started. Then from there, it kept going. At that point in time, he's training in the ring, getting better with wrestling.
What?
Not who he had the look. He had the teeth. He had the body. He had to get better at wrestling. And then that went and coincided with Dusty Rhodes saying, wait a minute, you look good.
You gotta do it. You gotta do it in Dusty voice, please.
You look good, baby. Your boy looked good. You look real good. The pretty teeth. My God, your boy got some teeth. I'm like, he does? And when Dusty said he figured out he could wrestle, woo, then that pretty much did it. And then Dusty wanted to send him back to the power plant. I think was over at his WCW training school. I think he was making about $500 a week, went back and learned how to wrestle a little bit more. He had it and then was there for just a brief period of time. It was weird.
I had a thought now, Jerry. It's funny how parallels in sports and life, because I literally just spoke about this in taping last night with Steve and Scott in the baseball terms as minor league baseball players. But think about this for a second. Mark, when he took up the sport, the art of wrestling, what year would that have been ballpark? First decided to get into wrestling, would you figure?
1989.
Okay. So now, very parallel to Steve Carsey now. Steve was drafted 1990, 1991 in the minors, okay? So now, imagine this, folks. We are in the year 2022. Imagine for a guy as Marc Bagwell with his body and his physique and his image and everything else. He's doing this in the era of no social media, barely any internet, if that, no cell phones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The way he came up and shot through as a cannon, in this day and age terms, if you think about it, we're talking now 1 to 2 million followers on Instagram in your sleep. Like, that's how big, to 10 million plus. Like, this is how big he would have been in that era. And part of the generations for the athletes out there that start off in the pre-social media, pre-internet stage and going today, there's not as much footage of them out there. There's not as much tweets and Instagram videos, etc., because people didn't have those things out there. They didn't have those cameras at the arenas to film them and posting them all over the place. That's why when you're going back and looking for footage of the Handsome Stranger, of Fabulous Fabian, when Alexander Bagwell started off as Marcus Alexander Bagwell, there is nothing out there because there was nothing out there. There was VHS, as Steve Carsey would say, and that's about it. And, and part of that, at the end of the day, you got your privacy at the end. It meant that every bar you went into, you didn't have somebody shooting you every 2 seconds and putting it on TMZ. But reality is then it was harder to build your brand. Mark was building it in an era when you couldn't really build much. There was nothing to work off of. So kudos to him. But in that sense, it holds you back. Thinking now, if Mark came out as a rookie in this day and age, whoa. Like, can you imagine, Jerry?
Quadruple every number that you just said.
You're talking about
dollar wise, salary, Nintendo, Milton Bradley, Kenner, all the doll companies, the T-shirts, the replica top hats, quadruple. I mean, incredible. Astronomical numbers.
People could say, he was a mid-carder. He never had a heavyweight championship. He never was an Intercontinental champion. He was involved in many tag teams, several times tag team champion. But this was a person, what WCW knew, whenever you bring him on, if it's the beginning of the show, middle of the show, end of the show, it's money in the bank. The guy knew how to talk, knew how to wrestle, always got the crowd reaction. And that's what pays the bills at the end of the day. when they look at those TV numbers, they know when the spikes are there. They know who's selling out the arenas and who isn't. And you know what? Go back and watch the old footage, even of that WWF match. They were cheering for him when he came out there. And he was, by the way, the last match of the night for a reason.
No doubt. I mean, the signs in the crowd, every one of them, when they hold the signs up, when the music starts, Buff something. One of the coolest ones I ever saw was, you remember the tune growing up, Puff the Magic Dragon.
Heard of it?
Yep. Somebody had a sign that read, Buff the Magic Dragon. And it had the dragon. They put time into it. It was a good one. But all the signs, incredible. I mean, this and WCW knew what they had, and probably used that as bait during the sale of WCW to Vince McMahon and WWF.
I think Vince McMahon at the end of the day said, I am so rich and you tried to bury me. I'm going to bury this thing just to F you and screw you. And I'm going to show you. They handed him a gift. They gave him this magical product with magical wrestlers, and he flushed it all down because he doesn't give a crap about it and it don't matter. And that's how much power he had. And, anybody else who would have bought it could have kept it going in the legacy. He flushed it on purpose. I think that's a fact. Sorry, Vince, if you're listening here, but that's the way it goes. And we understand that. But from a gimmicky standpoint, at the end of the day, when that took, part of, I always tell Mark that part of my kinship is he walked out for the first time as Buff Daddy on my birthday. And
wow.
That was the best birthday gift anybody. And I remember vividly watching it. And I'm saying, this is the best thing ever. My eyes lit up. Think about it. He's buff, he's the stuff, and the girls can't get enough. Like, that's just awesome. You could say that in 30 years from now, and that's going to hold. Like, that's one of those things. Even though this is the real Marc Bagwell series, and the idea is to take away the top hat and the glasses to bring out who the real Marc Bagwell is. That is the real Marc Bagwell. Sorry, folks, to break it to you. But the guy you talk to in the top hat is the guy you talk to on the phone as well. That is him. He's always been buff, right?
No doubt. That's it. I mean, you hit it dead on. I didn't know about the birthday thing and the buff and it coming out. That's,
very few people know huge. Because my birthday is very irrelevant for most people. But if you go research it now, you'll know what my birthday is, but not the same year, obviously. But it's pretty freaking cool anyways. But it's funny how those things kind of work out. Like, I share a birthday with Nick Swisher and with Joe DiMaggio, two of my favorite baseball players of all time, both Yankees. I'm a big Yankees fan. And it's funny how the universe kind of works that way. But be that as it may, at the end of the day, I wanted to ask you, when we bring up this whole part and, knowing as far as, he went through the trenches and getting to where he is, when you first, we're going to sum up today's chapter. I got to ask you, when you first saw and heard the gimmick of Buff Daddy, when did that happen and how did you react to it?
Wow.
We don't prepare this stuff, by the way. The reason why I don't tell you in advance, I want to see your true reaction. That's why I know you keep telling me, send me the question. No. Let's see the real reactions. It's more fun.
Do you know who came up with the name Buff?
Nick Patrick on the WCW airplane.
Yes. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Nick Patrick the son of the original wrestler, the Assassin? Research that. Maybe. That's a good one. That's a good one.
I'm good, but I'm not that good. I know Macho Man. I know Macho Man was a baseball player in the Cincinnati Reds organization. If not for an injury, he would have never come to wrestling, but he still became a baseball player. But I cannot tell you Nick Patrick's daddy. No.
Yeah. I'm gonna say 1994. It started coming out almost right before the NWO White. Mm-hmm. And some wrestling, statistician right now saying, you're wrong. But 94,
it's all good.
It fit him perfectly. You relate that name, Buff. Look at his body, how buff he is. The B, Buff. There we go. Look out. Buff Bagwell. So the B and the B. The Marcus Buff Bagwell they never used that. It was Buff Bagwell and Buff Daddy.
And what was your reaction when you heard the words Buff Daddy?
This is going to be big. This is going to be huge. You could do so much more with that character name, with dolls, toys, video games, verse. There we go. The shirts. There we go. There we go. Versus just a name, and not plain, but just your name. It just, you had to have something with it, or you had to change something, or it had to be a name. And that, bam, with the song, Nick Patrick coming out with the name.
Fit like a glove.
Oh, man, incredible. Fit perfectly. And you see what happened, exploded.
I mean, you going around with him in a car, going to the mall, when all this stuff is exploding, when the WCW NWO was at its peak, man, you got to feel like you're running around with Mick Jagger at this point, eh? Like it's nuts.
It got to the point to where really he almost, when he got back home, or we got back home, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. Or it was early or late or VIP room, or it was it just, you couldn't do it. As time progressed around where we're from, Marietta, Georgia.
Good old Marietta.
It got easier there to go out. Still, little kids would come up and all that, but a different city. If we were going to Toronto, or we were going to Manhattan or Boston's, the Garden, and went out to eat beforehand, lunch, forget it. One after another. Nobody had a Sharpie back then, and so therefore he always wears the bag with the zipper in the front. What do you call that in Canada?
Fanny
Bag?
fanny pack.
Man purse. And
no. There's Merces.
Merce.
It's called a Merce. I have a Merce. It's fine because I got too many keys and things to carry around all the time. So, you put it across. It's called a satchel. But back in those days, those wrestlers with those tie-dye pants and the cutout from the armpit, the tank top, and then they have that fanny pack right on.
That's it.
That fanny pack, like you're traveling, you got to put your passport in there. But you know what? Only a wrestler can make a fanny pack cool.
Make it cool. Kept a Sharpie or two in there, black only at that point, and didn't really have any pictures, but they didn't care. You sign an arm, back, chest, hat, didn't matter. They wanted it. And
I'm scared to ask how many chests that Mark probably signed, but we won't go there.
Woo!
We won't go there.
Me? Oh, bro.
He would make Mick Jagger blush. So, but it was crazy times, eh? Like just as far as the whole ride, and that's again talking about the real Marc Bagwell experience. You being family growing up, knowing him his whole life, enjoying it with Mark together, us together, sharing stories, and there's a lifetime of stories, and that's the point of this series at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Spreading good times, sharing the real stuff, get to know the real Mark, his family, his friends. We'll dig up more guests, more fun people like Jerry, and we'll have a good time, folks. I promise you.
No doubt.
Jerry, as always, thank you so much for taking the time for us. Again, you're so gracious. I know you're on the road a lot, and your time is very valuable, and you're able to put in this time. And I know you do it with the love of Mark in mind and our friendship, and really appreciate that. And you've been a great supporter of the podcast, the Chosen Life podcast, and the Steve Carsey series. And now, guess what, buddy? You manifested it, and you're on. It's now
in. We got it. Yeah, we got it going on.
Guess
the
what?
Best is yet to come.
My best advice to you, Jerry, as our series takes off, invest in a very good fanny pack and Sharpies of your own, because they're coming for you, Jerry Hood.
I'm ready, bro.
Just make sure you sign it, Jerry. Don't call me Mark Hood.
I am not your Buff Bagwell.
But we're pretty darn close.
Yes, sir.
All right. Keep smiling, brother. We'll see you on the next chapter.
We're good, bro. Have a good night.
Peace.